If you're new to a Tesla vehicle, you may have noticed this car is like an iPhone in a lot of ways. But one of those ways is the fact that there are a ton of settings you can dial in with these cars. But of course, out of the box, you don't really know about them, and the company ships you the phone assuming you want certain settings as the defaults. These are kind of what they generally assume most people want, and Tesla does the same things in their cars. But there are a decent amount of settings that I advise to turn off when you first get your car, or turn on when you first get your car. So today I'm going to break down all of those and then detail some of the other things on screen you may not know about. So let's get into it. To start with, let's get into the settings that you should turn off when you first get your Tesla. Now, some of these will be turned off automatically, but some of them may have been turned on in the past if you're buying a used vehicle, so you'll want to make sure that these are off. The first here is parental controls. If you do not need these, you'll want to make sure that they're turned off, and you'll find this by going to your main settings by clicking the car icon, going to safety, and then scrolling all the way down until you get to parental controls. Just make sure that is turned off. But you can also see what the parental control options are here. And if you want them on, you can decide if there's certain things you want to turn off. The other thing to turn off right below this is speed limit mode. Right now it says 85, and you can turn this on and you can create a pin to do so. Let's just make it 1111 and set the speed. You can set it as high as 120 miles per hour as the top speed that this car can get to, or you can set it all the way down as low as 50 miles per hour. Of course, in most scenarios, that's not something you're going to want turned on, so you can just leave that off. The next setting comes via the navigation menu, and there are a number of things to turn off here when you first get your car. One will be use HOV lanes, unless you're actually driving a carpool or have access to this lane via something like EV carpool stickers. You'll want that to be turned off. And then another thing that might be nice is automatic navigation. Automatic navigation will try to automatically route you to your home or your work, but sometimes it just gets it wrong because it assumes at a different time of day that you're doing something, and it can be a little annoying, so I prefer to turn this one off. Instead, you can just program in your home and your work, and you have buttons sitting here at all times on your main screen. Another setting you may prefer to turn off is Sentry Mode sounds. If you're often parking in areas that are safe and you want Sentry Mode on, but you don't think it's really all the time going to be actually detecting real events, you can choose to disable Sentry sounds. And Tesla says by disabling sounds, Sentry Mode will no longer honk or generate a loud, unexpected sound when a significant threat is detected. Now, this depends on your particular situation. Maybe this absolutely is something you're going to want to have turned on. The next one is something that has changed a little bit in the latest version of the Model Y, and you have an auto option here for traction control mode. There's also slippery surface, and they say use on slippery roads to distribute traction evenly across all tires, and then off-road assist. Basically, if you're on either of those, but not actually in this situation, you want to change that over to auto. On other cars, this will be a toggle for slip start, and you'll basically want to have that turned off unless it's really that situation. Now, if you're brand new to a Tesla vehicle, something you may want to have turned off is auto shift. You can turn it off right here on the bottom of the dynamics menu, and you may want this off because it can be a little confusing at first. When you have this turned off in the latest Tesla vehicles, you will shift by pressing and holding the brake and then swiping which direction you want to go on screen. It's a lot more like a traditional car with shifting stocks, where you're not in a gear until you actually select it. However, there's two levels of auto shift features here in the Model Y and 3, at least the latest versions that Tesla ships. The first is auto shift out of park. When the vehicle is in park, auto shift can assist you with shifting out of park into drive or reverse drive modes using only the brake without you using the touchscreen. Now, when you get used to this, this is very nice, but if you're not, it could end up with you hitting the brake expecting that you're shifting, and then suddenly going a direction you are not expecting. There is feedback on screen, so you really understand which direction you're going, but it can be something that is a little confusing if you're new to a Tesla, so I do recommend having this off at least at first. Then you can turn this fully on, and this is something that will actually help you in multi-point turns. Again, I like this feature overall because I'm used to these cars, but if you're brand new to these cars and still getting used to all the features, having this off may be a little bit better for an introduction. Now, when you first get this car, whether or not you bought the full self-driving package, it will at least come with a trial of that. And one feature that's included is actually Smart Summon. Now, there's a standby mode in this that actually drains battery because it's basically always waiting to be used. And you can turn this off by going to Autopilot, going to the actually Smart Summon section, and then turning standby mode off. Essentially, it says someone will not be on standby when car is put into park. Otherwise, when you have this on, the rest of the time it will remain on standby except for these locations that you exclude. Basically, turning this off will probably save you some battery. Now, in the lock settings, there's a setting that may or may not be turned on when you get your car, and that is driver door unlock mode. Tesla describes this, saying, when enabled, the driver door and charge port will unlock when the key is detected near the driver's side of the vehicle. Holding down the interior driver door button will unlock the rest of the vehicle. This is something that's a great feature if you're just a single person getting into your car and hardly ever want the rest of your car unlocked. However, if you want to, when you walk up to the car, be able to get into anywhere in your car, you'll want to go ahead and turn this feature off. Now, if you're somebody who uses toll roads, in the navigation menu, usually automatically selected is the option to avoid tolls. But if you actually want to use those toll roads, go ahead and turn this off. Similarly, if avoid highways was turned on, that's absolutely something most people are probably going to want to have turned off. Next, in the charging menu on screen, there's an option to keep accessory power on. Tesla describes this, saying phone chargers, USB ports, and low voltage outlets remain powered after exit if the battery is above 20%. When enabled, it continues to consume energy even when no devices are connected. So if you don't plan on using this feature, you'll want to turn this off. That way you're conserving as much power as possible. Another feature that can consume some power as well when you don't necessarily want to is cabin overheat protection. Oftentimes people will notice that a Tesla vehicle just appears to be running and it's sitting in a parking lot unused. And that's oftentimes because of cabin overheat protection. Now this can be a great feature because cabin overheat protection attempts to maintain the cabin temperature under the chosen temperature while parked for up to 12 hours after you leave. No AC mode consumes less energy, but temperatures may exceed 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Essentially, it's making sure that the cabin never gets to an insane temperature when parked out in the sun. And you can have this on and choose your approximate activation temperature, have this as that no AC mode, or have this off, which will save the most energy. The thing I would say to keep in mind here is that if you have this off, just remember to precondition your car, and oftentimes that can be better because you're actually conditioning it in a focused way when you really need it to be conditioned, as opposed to just keeping it at kind of a baseline all the time. Similarly located in the safety menu is the option for pin to drive and pin for glove box. In some cases, this is a great thing because even if someone takes your key, they can't actually drive away with your car until they type in the pin. However, if you're not too worried about a scenario like this or your key gaining access to the glove box, these will just be annoying and you'll have to type in a pin every single time, so you can go ahead and turn these off. Now, in the latest Tesla vehicles, you will have a few different options at the bottom here that you can scroll down to, and one of them is software. First, I like to have software updates on advanced here because I like getting these updates in advance. However, if you don't really care and don't mind waiting for a software update, you can have that on standard. But you'll notice at the bottom of this software menu are all these privacy options. And these are where you can dial in things that you will be prompted at some point at the beginning of setting up your car, but maybe you want to dial it in further or didn't really know what you were agreeing to. This is where you can turn certain permissions off. So for data sharing as a whole, Tesla says, we do not sell your data to anyone for any purpose, period, and we use data to improve and create new safety and convenience features. We apply precision anonymization like blurring to external camera data. Unless there is a safety critical event, camera data is not linked to your VIN. So for myself, I don't mind certain permissions here, but I don't want my data included when I'm in park. But then make sure when you dial in what you actually prefer, you click Accept Selected as opposed to Accept All. One of the features I do prefer to turn off here is cabin camera analytics, because that will be using the camera right here, and they'll be able to, of course, collect analytics from that camera specifically. They say by default, cabin camera images and videos are not shared with Tesla. However, you can opt in and share camera data to continuously improve the intelligence of safety and convenience features that rely on cabin camera, like video calling, autopilot, automatic emergency braking, and others. We want to be very clear that to protect your privacy, cabin camera data will not be associated with your account or VIN. So they're not associating it, but they still would be collecting it if you keep this option on. I prefer to have it off. Another thing you can check is under location sharing, if it's sharing with anything else. Sometimes people will set up third-party apps with their Tesla vehicle and then find that it's actually sharing that data with that third-party app, and you may not want that, so you can turn that off there. Again, though, it almost seems like they're trying to trick you here by having you turn things off, dial in what you don't want, and then accidentally clicking Accept All, and not seeing that, oh wait, now all of this is on. Just make sure you turn off the things you don't want to share with Tesla and then choose Accept Selected. Now, one thing you may have noticed on screen in the Tesla vehicle is that there actually are a lot of apps. Now, you can choose to dial these in by pressing and holding on one of the icons in the dock, shifting them around, adding something different if you prefer, and much more like that. But for myself, there's actually a bunch of apps in here that I don't even have logins for and don't even care about, especially when it relates to music and streaming. Of course, I don't have to have those in my dock, but sometimes I do need to open up this bigger menu and maybe I just don't want a lot of clutter there. There is a place that you can turn these off. Notice right here in the card for music, there's these 3 lines. You press that, and that's for audio settings overall. This is where you can dial in immersive sound if you prefer, dial in EQ settings, dial in the balance, but then after options, you'll see sources, and this is where you can turn off things that you do not actually use. For myself, I don't use Spotify, I don't use Apple Music, I don't use YouTube Music, TuneIn, SiriusXM, or Karaoke or Live One, so now this is much simpler. Those are all turned off. I close this out. And now when I open up for more apps here, look at how much simpler this menu just got. Let's talk about a couple more things with audio. The first is the option to lower volume in reverse. This is again under the safety menu. You scroll down quite a ways and then you'll see lower volume in reverse. Essentially, when you shift into reverse and you're listening to music, it will lower the volume in your car so you're really paying attention there. I prefer to have this off because I'm paying attention anyway, and I like to have my music basically stay at the same volume. Then again at the bottom here under Bluetooth, where you're paired with your phone, you have the option to reduce fan speed during calls. Tesla says climate must be set to auto. Settings will be restored when call ends. Essentially, you'll hear this turn on because you take a phone call and all of a sudden the vents get quieter. It can be better for the audio of a phone call and maybe that's your priority, but maybe it's incredibly hot out and you can't sacrifice that, so you'll want to turn this option off. Then another feature that involves the volume in the car and the sounds the car will produce for you is all the way at the bottom of the Autopilot menu, the green traffic light chime. Tesla says a chime will play when the traffic light you are waiting for turns green. For some, this is very nice because if you zone out for a second, it dings at you and you know that it has turned green and then you can go. But for myself, again, I'm usually paying attention and usually I don't want any interruptions to the music I'm listening to, and having a ding every time it turns green can be a little annoying and distracting, so I prefer to turn this off. Another setting in this same menu for Autopilot is the expanded full self-driving visualization. Essentially, when you enter full self-driving, it will fill up the whole screen automatically, and then you can't actually see your maps. You can see the next direction, but you can't see that overall view. I prefer to still have this split view, so I always turn this off. And then when engaging full self-driving at the top of the Autopilot menu, you have the option to start FSD Supervised from park. I actually quite like this feature because basically you get in the car and you can press and hold on screen to start this. But I prefer to start that and not have to confirm another step there. Some people like this, that you have to press the brake to confirm, but I prefer to turn this off. Tesla makes you agree here and says brake confirm is enabled by default, and you click yes. But this is the option I prefer because basically I can get in the car, get ready, put my seatbelt on, tap to go, and then it will start driving. Now the last feature you may want to turn off here is in the navigation menu. For some, this may be something they want to turn on. For others, it's something you'll want to turn off, and that is third-party charging stations, all the way at the bottom of the navigation menu here. Tesla will show fast charging stations and destination charging stations that are not owned or serviced by Tesla. Now, if you're like me and you live in California, you don't really need these, and Tesla superchargers are by far going to be your best options, so you'll want to turn that off. Now let's get into the things you'll want to turn on, and to start with, let's go into the safety menu. Basically, you'll want to make sure it's turned on to save dash cam in all scenarios here. I prefer to have this on auto, so it will automatically save up to 10 minutes of video to your USB when your vehicle detects the occurrence of a safety event. And then I also like to have on honk selected because it will automatically trigger a save on a horn press. The third way that you can save this footage as well is manually by tapping the icon in the dock when you're in drive. Simply tap that and it now says saving dash cam clip. One feature that's probably on automatically, but you'll want to double check on, is under the locks menu, and that is walk away door lock. Automatically lock doors and trunks when leaving with your phone or key fob. For some people, maybe they still prefer to always manually lock their car, but this is a very nice feature because you just walk away and it will lock for you. It's very reliable. Now under the display settings, something you may want to turn on here is, if you scroll down, you'll see scroll wheel function. This is something that's automatically turned on, but you can dial this into whatever feature you want. And essentially, you press and hold on the scroll wheel, and then you'll get this secondary menu where you can adjust this. So I'm adjusting my temperature with this left scroll wheel because I press and held it instead of just pressing it once. Again, there are tons of options like camera, defrost, dome lights, glove box, and more. Maybe I want this to be my now dedicated glove box button, so I don't always have to navigate to this menu and go to controls and a glove box button right there. I can instead just press and hold the scroll wheel. For most people, they're going to want Tesla software updates in advance, so under the software menu, click advanced instead of standard like I talked about earlier. Then going to the navigation menu just below that, you'll want Trip Planner to be on. Make sure that this is on because it will automatically route you to Tesla supercharger stops if they are necessary, and it will make sure that you do not run out of range whatsoever. However, if you turn this feature off, it will be more of a standard trip planner that doesn't involve charging stops, and you'll be a little bit on your own there, and could end up in a bad situation, so definitely keep this on. One setting you may want to turn on that I don't see actually as an option in my latest Model Y is under the lights menu, and that's the option to turn off your turn signal once you've completed your lane change. It's a cool feature that kind of combines the self-driving technology with manual controls, where you signal to make a lane change and it actually recognizes when that has been completed. It doesn't require a certain amount of turning before it recognizes to turn off the turn signal. Under the Autopilot menu, there will be a number of features you may want to turn on. First will be full self-driving if you get that beta, or if you get it included as a free trial with your car. It's definitely something that's pretty cool to try, but you do have to come to this menu to turn it on and agree to certain things about it. There are a number of features that you can dial in here as well when it comes to warnings and lane departure avoidance. You can have that be a warning or assist. Then another safety feature to make sure is turned on is forward collision warning, and you have the option of late, medium, or early. I find that early is a little bit intense. I actually prefer to have this on late, but make sure that this is on in some form. But the big one to make sure is that if you do not have autopilot or full self-driving enabled, you'll want to make sure that automatic emergency braking is in fact selected here under the autopilot menu. That's selected by default if you have these systems, and you can see that it's grayed out, so I can't even turn it off when I'm engaged with full self-driving, but you'll want to make sure that's on if you're opting not to use these systems whatsoever. Of course, automatic emergency braking is a great safety feature. Then you can also make sure emergency lane departure avoidance is turned on too. Another option you'll want to turn on in your Tesla is the option to apply brakes when regen is limited. Now this is something they added a couple years ago, and in the latest version of the Model Y, I actually don't see the option. So basically they're trying to say this should be on at all times. But if you have that option in your dynamics or pedals and steering menu right here, go ahead and turn that on. Essentially, it's going to emulate one pedal driving all of the time, even when your car is up to 100% battery. When you think about it, regen braking works by actually, when you let off that pedal, it's recapturing the energy of braking and putting it back into the battery. However, if your battery is full, there's nowhere for that energy to go. So all of a sudden, your car turns from a one pedal driving setup to a two pedal driving setup. And instead, having this option on will make sure it's one pedal driving across the board. It does that by actually applying the normal brakes, but in a one pedal driving manner, versus this car just has one pedal driving essentially. Now, if you don't like all the loud chimes that happen in a car, you can go to the safety menu here, scroll down a little bit, and you'll see something called Joe mode. A lot of people don't really know what this is because it's called Joe mode. And you can see enabling Joe mode reduces the volume of your car's chimes. The quieter chimes continue to alert the driver effectively and minimize disruption to passengers in the rear seats. I make sure that this is always on, and I much prefer this. Then there are a couple cool features for the display that may be on but may need dialing in for you. And that is, first off, to have your appearance as dark mode, light mode, or auto. Now, I prefer to have auto because I like it to be this white, bright setup during the day, but then at night it's automatically going to turn to dark mode. Others may prefer to look at dark mode all of the time, so you can change it to that. But then reduce blue light is a feature I really like to have on. Automatically adjusts to warmer colors at night. You do notice it turns a little more yellow as opposed to straight blue light. Now, we talked about the dash cam earlier, but essentially the parked version of that is Sentry mode. This is under the safety menu, and it's the first option you see here. And you'll want to make sure that this is on. Auto enable Sentry in park. Basically, everywhere that I park, excluding home, it's going to automatically have this turned on. Now, you can exclude other places or exclude everything that's in your favorites, or of course you can include your home if you prefer. Basically, you keep in mind that Sentry mode does use some energy, but it's something that keeps your vehicle safe. Then something you'll have to turn on when you initially get into this car is the view camera via mobile app. If you do like this feature, it allows you to stream the cameras from your car to your mobile Tesla app. When there's someone inside, you can't view the interior camera. And there are other privacy considerations from Tesla, like the fact that this is end-to-end encrypted and Tesla cannot actually access it. So I like to have this turned on, but you do have to agree to it and turn it on within the car for the first time before you're able to access it from the Tesla app. Now for daily charging, you'll want to make sure that this is dialed in correctly. Essentially, for your day-to-day driving, you want about 80%, and Tesla will say 80% recommended for daily driving. But if you're driving certain standard range vehicles, Tesla will recommend 100%, so just stick to what it says here. And then you have the option to make this a one-time charge or keep. And it's nice that they added this so you can just choose to do this one time, because when you're going on a road trip, you'll probably want this all the way at 100%. So I recommend setting it to probably about 100% when you're getting ready for a road trip, 80% for your daily driving, and then for long-term storage, more like 50%, and then have it plugged in. If you need to clean your Tesla's screen, which will happen in some time because you're touching it all the time, it's going to get some fingerprints, you can go to Display and then Screen Clean Mode. This goes into this mode that allows you to clean the screen without messing up any vehicle controls, and then you press and hold here to exit after about 4 seconds, and you're back. Now we've talked a bunch about full self-driving, but one thing you'll want to dial in is your personal aggressiveness. I usually use hurry mode here because it drives faster and has more frequent lane changes, and as of late I've actually found that this system, even in hurry mode, doesn't even drive quite the speed limit in a lot of cases. It still is quite a bit under, but for whatever your personal preference is in your area, you can dial this in between chill, standard, and hurry, and you can also dial those in with the scroll wheel. Under lights, there are a few different options you'll probably want to have on auto. For headlights, keep that on auto. If you have it on, of course, they will be entirely on when you don't need them to be. Put that on auto. Dome lights on auto is also pretty good. And then you can choose for the accent lights if you want them on 24/7, if you want them only to be on at night. So you can see they just turned off here. And then you can dial in brightness as well as whatever color you prefer. Now we talked about making sure walk-away door lock is turned on, but another thing you'll want to turn on in case you walk away from the car but actually leave a door open is car left open notifications. Tesla says a mobile notification will be sent after 10 minutes if the frunk, the trunk, or any door is left open, or if the vehicle is left unlocked unexpectedly. At times, this has actually saved me in certain circumstances where I left a door open and didn't realize it, or somebody with access to the car left their phone in there so it was actually unlocked even though I had walked away from the car and it should have locked. Then close windows on lock is another great feature to have. Basically, if you have all your windows rolled down, as soon as you walk away and it locks, it rolls them back up. The default setting that Tesla has for their wipers is going to be auto in the controls menu here, and most likely that's what you're going to want to keep it at, but you can also turn this off or choose between these different modes on screen. Also, if you press the wiper button on the steering wheel, it brings up these options which you can scroll between, and then you press and hold to wash. Lastly, most people are going to feel comfortable with a lock confirmation sound, and that is under locks all the way down under lock confirmation sound. On top of that, you can customize this sound, which is kind of fun. So those are all the things you should turn off or turn on in this car, but let's get into some extra features people may not fully understand. First is the map system here. So we have this whole map system, and a lot of times people don't see these controls that usually are here and wonder where they went. Just tap anywhere and they will pop up. Of course, that is toggling your satellite view. This also toggles traffic, so we can see all of the lines overlaid. I think it's easiest to see that when you're in Maps view. You can see points of interest around you, or you can have that turned off. Then you can click superchargers and see all of the superchargers nearby. And then a new thing Tesla has added here is a weather overlay. You press this and it will zoom out to where it actually makes sense to see it. And now I can see this weather overlaid, which is a pretty cool view to see in these cars. It's scrolling through the day right here, so we can actually see what the rest of the day is going to end up being like. For me in California, nothing interesting is happening, but in other areas, there is some activity. And then furthermore, if you want to check on the weather, you'll notice it says what the temperature is up here. It's 93 degrees right now, and it's not just that. It gives me the AQI, and I can tap this to actually see the AQI and see a little bit more of a weather forecast for the rest of the day. It also gives me UV index, wind, humidity, and chance of rain. Under the Dynamics menu is where you'll dial in a few different things like your acceleration mode. If you have a performance vehicle, you'll have a sport option above this, but then deceleration mode is something that's actually new for the Model Y. Tesla says adjust how quickly the vehicle slows when the accelerator pedal is released. This setting does not impact range or brake pedal response. Essentially, your normal one-pedal driving is pretty aggressive. When you let off that pedal entirely, it starts braking pretty hard. But you can change this to reduced, and it will give you the same efficiency in the latest version of the Model Y. For a lot of people, changing this to reduced is a lot more comfortable when coming from a gas vehicle. Then under steering weight, you have 3 different options: light, standard, and heavy. I still prefer to keep this car in light, so it's just overall an easy drive. But some prefer to have more of a heavy steering experience. In the latest versions of these cars as well, there's a hands-free trunk option. You can dial this in under locks and then a hands-free trunk right here. And Tesla says stand still behind your vehicle's trunk with phone key unobstructed until you hear chimes and it opens. This requires an ultra-wideband supported phone, so not everyone will have this feature between the car and their phone as a pair. But I like to have this on because it will automatically open for me, but sometimes it's a little bit too sensitive. You stand there for just a second, you're just checking on something else, and all of a sudden it's beeping and letting you know the trunk is about to open. For the most part, the on-screen brightness will be fine with auto settings, but if you go to the display menu as well, if you're in a situation where it's just too dark or too bright, you can adjust that to your liking. Now, under the service menu are a couple things you may actually want to engage with. It might freak you out because it says service, and it's like, I'm not supposed to touch this, but there are a few things you can engage with. First, by clicking service, you'll see the PSI of all your tires, along with what's recommended there. Then by scrolling down, you can see camera visibility, and it will let you know if there's any issues detected with camera visibility. But one thing I actually did recently was recalibrated my cameras. You can click camera calibration here, and it says clearing the Autopilot camera calibration will reset the calibrated camera positions and angles stored on the Autopilot computer. Now, this isn't something most people will need to do, but sometimes if you get your windshield changed out and they didn't actually do this for you, you'll notice some weird behaviors from Autopilot, and this will help with that. Another thing some people like to engage with is the battery health option here, where it will actually tell you if your battery is healthy, and you can run a battery health test that takes a long time. It says to perform the test, your vehicle must remain connected to an AC charging station for up to 21 hours. And then it will let you know how the health of your battery is and recalibrate its predictions. Then one very big piece that's very cool about Tesla vehicles is driver profiles. These automatically sync and save all of your settings for everything, including your logins, all your settings on screen that we've been talking about, mirror positions, and more. Tesla will prompt you to make sure that this is linked to your phone, and usually it will be set up correctly, but if you need to change something here, this is how you do it. Right here we can see I have a phone and then 3 different key cards. The first 2 are linked to the profile Ryan. However, these 2 key cards are not. Let's say that for whatever reason I want to link those to my key cards. I first make sure that I'm in that driver profile right here that I want, and it says it right there, Ryan. And then I tap this little icon, and now these are officially linked to my driver profile. Now, if you find yourself in the car with somebody who wants a vastly different climate scenario than you do, maybe a totally different temperature, you can actually split the air vents here, but it's a little bit hidden. You open this menu typically to dial in what you want here, and then maybe you want to change the temperature. However, this is globally changing the temperature. But you do see, once I'm changing it, there's this option right here that says split. Tap that, and now you have this secondary control, and this can be dialed into something completely different. Then if you want to go back on this, you just press that split again, and it joins them. The other thing you'll notice under the climate menu is the option to keep, and it says climate will stay on after you leave the car, will turn off when battery reaches 20%. I love this when it's extremely hot out and I'm just going into a store real quick, just keep the temperature. You can also do dog mode, which actually alerts people that there is a pet mode running, so your dog is totally safe in the car, and then you have camp mode. Lastly, you have what Tesla calls bioweapon defense mode, and this is something that's in the Model Y, S, X, and Cybertruck. You can tap that right there, and it's going to get very loud. But this is their proper HEPA filtration system. And then there's this new vent feature in the Model Y, which they call swing mode. You tap this right here, and you can see what it's doing with the vents. It's just swinging back and forth with the air consistently. It's kind of nice. It's just like an oscillating fan. Then, since there is a rear screen in this car, you have a number of options to control that screen from the front screen. First, you can go lock rear display under displays, or you can tap here and actually click the rear button. And now I have full control over this display. I can first see what they're doing, and then I can control things from here if, say, I need to log somebody into something, but can't actually reach the display from here or anything like that. Real quick, a couple things to mention from the Tesla app. Right here, when you tap these 3 dots, Then click on your user. You'll see a few different options here, and one is notifications. This is the place that you can dial in what notifications actually get sent to your car, and there's likely a lot of things you'll want to turn on and things you'll want to turn off. If you have multiple vehicles as well, you can decide which are enabled there. So there you have it, a ton of tips for Tesla vehicles and how to optimize them, and then a bunch of settings to make sure that you turn off, and a bunch of others to make sure you turn on as soon as you get one of these cars. I hope this video was helpful for you, and in the meantime, if you want to see a video breaking down the top mistakes to avoid doing when you get a new Tesla, you can check out that video linked up here or in the description below. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.